Hey everybody, welcome to episode 36 of Duke's Download with my guest Malcolm Kenyatta, candidate for the United States Senate. We just tried this before. It didn't work properly for some reason, so we're going to give it one more try here, or another try. Hopefully it will work. Thank you for bearing with us, because for some reason it seems like there's some kind of technical difficulty. But, all right, it says he's on. So hopefully it's going to work this time. Oh, wait, he's not on. Hold on. Oh, all right, hold on. Hopefully this is going to work. Representative, it works. Sorry about that. I don't know what was going on.
No, it's totally fine.
Such an honor, seriously.
I'm happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
Such a huge fan and admirer, and have been for a long time. And I was so thrilled when I saw the news about your campaign for Senate. Congratulations, really.
Thank you so much. I'm taking congratulations. I'm also taking condolences for my free time.
I can only imagine. I mean, seriously, as if you weren't busy enough with everything going on, you know? But no, it seems like the reception has been unbelievable. I mean, obviously, I know you've been doing a lot of national press, and there's been a lot of coverage of your campaign. So, congratulations on that.
Well, we've been working really hard, and again, thank you for having me. But we just got huge news right before we came on that my good friend, former secretary here in Pennsylvania, Dr. Rachel Levine, now assistant secretary at the Department of Health and Human Services, was just confirmed as the first openly trans person ever confirmed by the United States Senate. And so I'm over the moon, and I just hope that that there are particularly non-binary folks and trans folks watching right now, and young people who are paying attention to this, who just get a sense that anything, absolutely anything, is possible. And so the only thing that makes me sad about her being confirmed today is that I didn't get to vote for her. I didn't get to vote for her nomination.
Well, I mean, I'm sure, I have no doubt that this is probably just the beginning of her ascendance to higher office. And so I'm sure, hopefully, who knows, maybe perhaps she'll be Secretary of Health and Human Services eventually.
Well, she has one vote already, so she's well on her way.
Absolutely. But no, I wanted, if I may, to start at sort of the beginning of your journey, because I already knew a lot about you, but I was doing some reading, and I didn't realize that you started getting involved when you were 11 years old. Is that right?
Can you believe it? That's right.
Amazing. And your grandfather was a civil rights activist, a pretty prominent activist, from what I understand. So
yeah.
I know he died when you were young, but was that sort of something that was influential for you?
So as I got older, absolutely. I'll sort of flesh that out a bit. So when I was 11 years old, both my parents, unfortunately, Duke, have since passed. My mom was a home health care aide for most of her career. My dad was a social worker. And, it was incredibly tough. A lot of the issues I'm talking about in this campaign are issues, I talk about because, I lived them. We were evicted multiple times. So when I talk about housing, that's why, I watched my mom ration her insulin, right, to make sure she could provide food for me and my siblings. And so that's why I, fight so hard to make sure everybody has health care, on and on. But my mom was she was a tough ass black lady. She just was. She was sweet as pie, but she was tough as nails. And I came home one day and, I said, Mom, there's this issue on the block, that issue on the block, whatever it was. And without skipping a beat, she was like, well, if you care so much, why don't you go do something about it? And I was like, oh, okay. And so I ran for junior block captain. And that was the first thing I ever did in terms of getting civically engaged. And it gave me this sense really early on of two things that I think are really pivotal. One, nobody's coming to save us, right? I don't buy into that. We've had so many campaigns where it's been about a cult of personality, and this one person's going to ride in and they're going to save us. I mean, that has not worked out, right, for us. We're still talking about a lot of the same issues. But this is the good news. We don't need anybody to save us. When we build coalitions, big coalitions that are centered around lifting up folks who've been often excluded or ignored, there's so much value and power in that. And I learned it as an 11-year-old kid.
Wow. It's pretty unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, and to think, I mean, so I know obviously I don't want to list, you've done so much, I can't list off all of the things you've done, but there are a few things in particular for those watching I wanted to mention, because I know you went to Harvard Law School, you were a delegate
My
in
grandfather went to Harvard
2016.
Law School. My grandfather went to Harvard Law School.
Oh,
I did I was an executive state and local government at Harvard's Kennedy
at the
School, so I did do
Kennedy
that.
School, right?
Yeah, I
Right, right.
decided law
I
school
apologize.
is a lot of money, a lot of time. I decided let's just go make laws.
My apologies for that. Thank you for the clarification. But no, I mean, the fact that, because it blows my mind, you're only 2 years older than me. I feel like I'm so behind, because I mean, when
You're
I
not.
knew you were, I knew you were in your early 30s, but I was like, wait a second, he's 30 years old. You were a delegate to the Democratic Convention in 2016, elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives in 2018 when you were 28. And then you were keynote speaker at the Democratic Convention, one of three gay men, the first gay men to ever be keynote speakers at the Democratic Convention. And then you were an elector for President Biden last year in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And then you decided to run for United States Senate. And, you know, and I've always been very passionate about the idea of more LGBTQ plus representation in politics. But how much, being an African American, an openly gay man, how much did those factors play into your decision to run? And obviously, of course, being, you know, what you would be the youngest member of the United States Senate, were those things that were at the forefront of your decision?
Not really, but let me tell you why they do matter to an extent. You know, there's nothing more powerful than lived experience. You know, when I talked about before, you know, growing up, you know, working poor, you know, my mom doing everything she could, getting my first job at the age of 12. I got a job at a vegan soul food restaurant, okay? Washing dishes.
Vegetarian, so.
Right? So I would have been washing the dishes if you had come in. Washing dishes to help my mom pay the bills. And you know, got a job at Checkers. I, you know, delivered through newspapers at the door, tried to get newspaper subscriptions. Did sort of telemarketing, worked at a movie theater. I mean, you know, so when I talk about working people and treating folks who work hard with dignity and aligning what we pay folks with also with a level of dignity, that's because I lived it. I think when you know what it's like to be treated unfairly simply because of who you are, because of the color of your skin, because of who you love, because of how you identify, that is not just like empty symbolism, right? When I talked about Dr. Levine at the beginning of this, because sometimes you get met with this really, like, I think, stupid argument from folks when you mention this of, well, we don't want somebody who's black or who's gay or who's whatever. We just want the most qualified person. Like, I mean, duh, right? Like, we wouldn't, like, Dr. Levine, like, is a good doctor. But also, there are things that she has experienced in her life. There are things that I've experienced in my life that no matter how much of an ally somebody is, they don't know in their bones the way I know in my bones what that means. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it's one thing to say, you know, oh my gosh, you know, marriage equality or what happened with the Supreme Court in terms of allowing folks who were fired from their jobs simply because they put up a picture of the person they love and finally having those, you know, protections. Oh, that's great. I support that. That's one thing. That's awesome. I love when people support that. But it's another thing to have that knot in the pit of your stomach. And I know that there are so many queer people who are watching right now who, when that case came out and they said it was decided, and I am just like, oh my God. I was like driving in the car, and so I'm like, let me pull over because if this does not go in a good way, or even if this goes the way that it ultimately went, what that feels like when your basic rights are litigated all the time. Mm-hmm. About just things that are so normal, so part and parcel to who we are as people, and watching those things be negotiated by other people. And so to be in a position where we don't just have to have folks who are cheerleaders for what we care about, but we can actually just put the team of people who reflect the fullness of American experience on the field, that has an impact for policy. It has an impact from a policy perspective. And so, no, I didn't really think about it until, honestly, until the launch video. And I was getting all these messages. And actually, one of my colleagues reached out to me and she said, Malcolm, the beginning of your video, you're my partner, just kisses me as we start the video. We literally did not think about it, right? Like, I didn't think about it at all. And she was like, to have like a serious candidate for the United States Senate, open their launch video, just doing the most normal thing that every person does, loving the person that you love, starting your day. She was like, you don't know how that impacted me. And like, I know you, but to see that and to see the whole world seeing that, she was like, you don't know how that impacted me and how I'm sure it impacted others. And so I got that message when I was with Dr. Matt. And I was like, oh shit, yeah, we did do that. And yeah, I guess that is a big deal.
It's a huge deal. I mean, and I think that's such a great way of framing it that, it's not something you in a way need to think about because it's just who you are. And by being who you are and living and just living your life. And I meant to mention that because your fiance, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
But I just thought, I thought that was such a groundbreaking moment in a way because it wasn't an intentional thing. It was just you living your truth and showing people who you are. So I thought that was really, really amazing. So more about the issues in the campaign. I mean, I know you've been very vocal about, obviously, and sort of the umbrella issue that encompasses a lot of other sub-issues, but the filibuster, which I saw you post about just a day or two ago, and you were saying, how so much of what we want to do in terms of the progressive agenda is not doable unless we first take this broader step. Maybe you can talk about why you feel like that's such an important issue that needs to be. I think it was a Politico article that said that this issue should be or is a litmus test for Democratic candidates.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know how this argument has really, bubbled up. I don't think most Americans give a damn, frankly, about arcane Senate procedure. Like, who cares? Who cares? Honestly, I mean, most Americans. But it really does matter. This is not, the filibuster is not some like sacrosanct thing that, came down on high from a higher power to say we have to have this thing. It's not in our Constitution. It gets played up as if the Senate cannot function without the filibuster, when the reality is the Senate's not functioning right now the way it should. And the filibuster, if you look at the history of it, has been used repeatedly to block anti-lynching legislation, to block civil rights legislation, to block Thurgood Marshall when he was nominated to an appellate court, to block poll taxes, to block progress. And so I think we have a fundamental job, and I say this in the article, to actually do shit for people. Like we have a job as government to actually deliver for people. And so the question is, should we pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act or not? Because we're not going to pass it with the filibuster. We're not going to. And so that goes to the fundamental question of whether or not you think everybody who is eligible should be able to vote. We should make it as easy as possible. If you believe that, then you also have to believe we have to get rid of the filibuster. If you watch, like I watched, and so many people across the world watched, yet another mass shooting, multiple people dead, families that will never be the same, and time again, policymakers in Washington has acted as if there's nothing they can do. There's nothing that we know can impact this issue, when the reality is the exact opposite of that. There's numerous things we could do to make our communities safer. I've introduced bills at the state level that would do just that. I was literally at a press conference reintroducing a bill that I have with with a colleague of mine, Representative Sanchez, on dealing with lost and stolen guns, for example. But yet again, even here at the state level, it's hit a wall. So from my perspective, the litmus test is whether or not we do things for the American people, whether or not we accomplish things for communities and on issues that we have had almost no progress. And I don't think we can make progress on these important issues with the filibuster still in place. And so we have to get rid of it, period. And so I hear this argument from folks, oh, well, Malcolm, if you get rid of it, then the Republicans are going to threaten that they're going to be more obstructionist. I mean, that's what they do every day. And so is the threat that Mitch McConnell is going to become a Republican? Like, is that the threat? Because that's who the hell he is already. So, I mean, give me a break. And if I'm in the Senate, you can bet your bottom dollar I will be publicly and privately with the caucus talking about our need to do something on this and to do it quickly. Because on all the issues I mentioned, and I know we'll talk about in more detail, when my family didn't have food, and we're standing in a food line, or we didn't have health care, we couldn't wait around for folks to debate and on, pontificate, all this other nonsense. We need government to act. We need it to act. And I think a lot of our elected officials don't move with the level of urgency because they're not personally impacted by what they do. They're questioning, well, how the hell do I stay? And so lick my finger, stick it in the wind, and how do I vote on things in a way that ensures that I stay, as opposed to how do I deal with the issues right now that people are dealing with?
Without a doubt. I mean, to me, it's so straightforward. Like, what purpose or what reason would voters have to reelect Democrats if it's just going to be this cycle of like, oh, Democrats come to power, they then do nothing or accomplish nothing because of the filibuster. So what incentive is there to reelect them? I mean, it just makes no sense to me. And it's very unlikely that we're going to see a filibuster-proof majority for, maybe never, especially given the way the Senate's structured. I just don't think. So for me,
well, if we make DC a state, we will get a little closer.
Well, right. Absolutely. And that's part of what I wanted to talk to you about is John Lewis Voting Rights Act, HR 1, general voting rights generally. I know on the state level, you've been very active in the lead up to the 2020 election and right afterwards with the Pennsylvania Republican Party. But I would just ask, what do you think in terms of, I saw the hearing that you did or that you were a part of with some of your colleagues in the Republican colleagues in the state legislature when they were trying to pass. Was it right before or right after the 2020 election?
It was right before. It was right before. Yeah, and it was they called it an election integrity committee. And to be clear, the way they had figured out to try to do this, it didn't require a signature of the governor. It didn't even require a vote in the state Senate. They were going to utilize the authority they currently had in the House to subpoena ballots, to impound voting machines, to drag elections officials before, sham hearings. And if anybody, and I know we all did, unfortunately, paid attention to how they conducted themselves following the election, there's no doubt in my mind, and shouldn't be any doubt in anybody's mind, that they would have utilized all of those tools had they had them at their disposal. And what we were able to do is do what I talked about at the very beginning. It wasn't about, oh, Malcolm. Like, certainly I played a role in sort of speaking out, talking about what this meant, interrogating the legislation, using the legislative process, the amendment process to expose the lies, the hypocrisy, and their scheme. But what happened was so many people got engaged. There were thousands and thousands of phone calls. People wrote letters. In the middle of a pandemic, folks stood out in the cold, out in Belmont, Pennsylvania, in front of the majority leader's office, saying, no, you have to pull this bill. And when they pulled it, they blamed, what they called me, a radical or something, and his media allies or something, whatever they said. But what we did was what we need to do on all of the issues that folks are concerned about right now. is we have to speak clearly about what we believe, be clear about what we're for, and then build a coalition to fight for what we believe and fight against what we don't believe. I mean, it's that simple, but it's also, that hard. And I think that sort of understanding of how you organize is something that we desperately need in the United States Senate.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think now they're trying to, since they lost the 2020 election, they're now trying to do both in Pennsylvania, but also in many other states. Mm-hmm. Of course, states that Joe Biden, won by a very slim margin, like Florida or Michigan, Wisconsin. They're trying to now put in place a lot of new, rules to try to curb and restrict voting access. Yeah. That this bill, but the HR 1, John Lewis Voting Rights Act, would prevent. But so that's a big part of why we need to eliminate the filibuster, is because we need to pass these reforms before they have the chance to implement all of these rules that would potentially, or in fact would very likely, allow them to steal the 2022, 2024 elections.
Yeah, getting to meet Representative Lewis, literally, I was in Atlanta just at the mall, and he was like with his staff, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, should I talk to him right now? I went over and talked to him, and he remembered my grandfather. Wow. I talked to him about, I was thinking about running for office, and he said to me, this is before I ran for state rep, he was like, you got to do stuff that scares you, and that has stuck with me for forever. But I mention him because, so many elected officials, praised John Lewis during his life, praised him after his death, talked about, how wonderful he was and all of that. And like, that's great, that's nice. But the way we really honor him and honor the whole generation of people that put their bodies on the lines, folks, black folks, white folks, young people, folks who put their bodies and their lives on the lines, who fought and bled literally. We talk about a lot of this stuff, sometimes metaphorically, right? Mm-hmm. Not all the time, because we need serious police reform. But in that moment, there were certainly not even conversations about, police reform. The idea that there would be civil rights and voting rights and all these different things. That was a real struggle, a real battle. And we all got to benefit from John Lewis's work. This country is a better place because of Representative John Lewis. And to just give him lip service and just say, oh, well, he was great. No, we can actually cement in law the work of his life, which was to make sure that every single person in this country can vote. And unfortunately, this is like a democratic thing. How absurd is that? How absurd is that? Mm-hmm. Every elected official should be for every single person voting. But the reason they're not is because they have horrible, shitty ideas. And so they can't convince you to support their shitty ideas. And so then they just want to shut you up.
I was thinking about this earlier, like I saw some quote, some senior Republican saying, if we don't, if this bill passes, we're going to have permanent Democratic control. I'm like, so wait a second. You're basically acknowledging that, as if there's something unfair or nefarious about expanding voting access, about letting more people vote. It's like, it's so straightforward to me. It's how can someone be against this? What is wrong with letting people vote days before the election? It's not like, it's insane that it's like, oh, by getting more people vote, that gives Democrats an unfair advantage. It's almost absurd that then they basically admit that that's the case. The less people vote, the more control we have. They are literally, they're unwilling to make a good faith argument to try to appeal to people. They're just like, we're going to rig this system and try to, keep our permanent minority control, essentially.
And also, Duke, that's also like not even what they're saying is not true everywhere. Ohio, for example, right, has much more liberalized, voting, early voting, absentee voting, all these different things. And there are a bunch of Republicans elected in Ohio, much to my chagrin. But that's democracy, right? Like, that is what it's about. And if we get to a place where we say, well, only the people who want to support me, those are only the people I want to vote, that really corrodes at the fabric of this experiment in democracy. And it is an experiment. And that's why I opened my video talking about the fact that the country is at a crossroads. We are at a fundamental crossroads right now. And if we don't have authentic leadership that's grounded in these issues, I think we're going to be in a tough spot.
Mm-hmm. And Trump even basically said something during the 2020 campaign like, oh, I'm okay with early voting in Florida or vote by mail in Florida, but not in Pennsylvania or not in, it's like, and they literally, and that's, I guess, like when in the post-election lawsuits, they were trying to pick and choose. Oh, we're behind in Arizona, so we want to stop, or yeah,
that's right.
We're ahead in Arizona, or whatever it was. We want to stop voting in the places we're ahead, but continue counting the votes in the places where we're behind, or whatever it was. It was just like, there's zero principle. It's all about, where it works for us. We want certain things. It's just there's zero principle. I just get so flustered about it because it's so mind blowing and But anyway, I wanted to ask you also about gun reform, because of course that's an issue that I know you just tweeted about earlier today, and it's in the last week. Obviously, it's been a horrifying week. But yeah, I mean, that's yet another issue where if we don't eliminate the filibuster, there's no way the assault weapons ban is happening again. We're not going to pass it again. And what are your feelings on that? I mean, I know you feel pretty passionate about this issue.
When you've sat with families like I have and like I do more often than I would like to, because the person that they loved best or that loved them best is never going to come through that front door again because they died at the hand of a gun, you understand the imperative for us doing something and doing something now. And we have the capacity to do something. This is not about taking away legal gun ownership. This is not about, infringing on anybody's Second Amendment rights. We can protect the Constitution and protect people. We can do both at the same time. And what frustrates, I think, a lot of people about government, and certainly what frustrates me, is that we don't even do, in many cases, the things that there is broad agreement on. An overwhelming majority of Americans support comprehensive background checks, including a majority of Republicans. Mm-hmm. Those are the facts. Yet we don't do it. A majority of Americans understand that we need to do something about legislatively, about bump stocks, about the amount of how much ammunition folks can have, about ghost guns, which people can just make at home without any type of background check. You just sell somebody a kit, now they can make a gun at home. That we can do something about ensuring that there are waiting periods. So not only do we deal with gun homicides, which often get a lot of the attention, but we also don't talk enough about folks who've died by suicide at the hand of a gun. Most of those folks, men. Mm-hmm. And that is something as well that has been close to my heart. There are people who I love deeply who have suffered with depression and other mental health issues and suicidal ideations. I lost a good friend of mine in college. His name is actually Roswell Friend, who died by suicide. And I started this thing called Students Together Ending Pain and Suicide. And I now serve on the Governor's Suicide Prevention Task Force. Over half of the suicides, in Pennsylvania, a gun was involved. And we know from great research on this that when somebody is having suicidal ideations, what you want to do is give them space and time and then reduce the means for them to effectuate those feelings in that moment. That's why when there are bridges where folks have routinely died by suicide, people put up gates, and that has drastically reduced it. Mm. But yet we don't do that with a gun. And so somebody having a crisis where they want to hurt somebody else or hurt themselves We don't give folks a minute to say, hey, let's hold on 1 second. Let's get a background check. Most Americans support that.
Mm-hmm.
The only people who don't support it is majority of the United States Senate. And so to fix that, we have to change the Senate. And, there we go.
Well, that's the thing. Even if we eliminate the filibuster right now, as has been in the news today and yesterday, Joe Manchin has said he's not in favor of
And Joe
background
Manchin
checks.
is dead wrong. Joe Manchin's dead wrong.
Yep. Yep. And so that's why we need to elect even more Democratic members come 2022, because we may need to wait another year or two until we have even a bigger Democratic majority in order to pass both background checks and the assault weapons ban.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. 50-50 is not much of a majority. It's an important thing that we did. And it's no shock to me that it was a young Jewish guy and a black guy who got that done. Winning that historic election was no shock to me at all. But we need a big majority if we're going to move on the type of bold agenda that I think Americans really want us to move on. If we're going to have health care for everybody, if we are going to do something about student loan debt, if we're going to address the most pressing challenge in front of us, climate change, if we're going to deal with what I call the moral issue of our generation, deep poverty, if we're going to deal with these things, it's going to require a big, bold majority. And I will tell you, I've been blown away by all the people who have just, gone to our website, James. It's just my name, malcolmkenyatta.com. Because when I first announced, I had a reporter who was like, oh my God, he was like almost laughing. He was like, you're not taking corporate PAC money? Like, how are you going to raise money? And we've been doing it $35 at a time. And that's because this is a movement that is unapologetically for working people, for marginalized people, for folks who want to start that small business, who want to have a planet that they can live on and raise their kids, because we deal with these issues. It's unapologetically for those people, and it's powered by those people. And that's why I've said over and over and over again, we have to build big coalitions. That is the only way you get it done. And so I don't want anybody to put all their hopes and faith and dreams into me. Put it into yourself and what we can do when we build something together.
Absolutely. There's so many issues, obviously, as you outlined many of them. Plus, big pieces of legislation, Equality Act, immigration reform, minimum wage. I actually wanted to ask you particularly about your opinion on the $15 minimum wage proposal, because I know there was a vote on whether or not to include it in the American Rescue Plan, and 8 Democrats in the Senate voted against that. What is your opinion? I'm assuming you support the $15 minimum wage, but what is your personal sort of point of view on why that number and why it's so important that the Senate pass that particular proposal?
As I said to you, I worked a job for starvation level wages. I worked 3 different jobs while I was in college because my parents could not afford to pay for my books or anything else. We have right now, what's really frustrating to me, because one of the first bills I introduced when I got elected to the House was a bill to raise the minimum wage to $15. What's frustrating is 2 things. First of all, $15 is already the compromise, frankly. If we had allowed the minimum wage to just rise naturally with inflation, we'd be much higher than $15. And so $15 is really the floor that gives folks some level of dignity with the work that they do. We have a consumer-based economy, and yet we don't pay the folks who help our economy thrive and move. Our economy doesn't work because there are a bunch of bankers walking around, an office room and walking around a conference room. It's not them that make it work. And I think it is the height of, I'll just call it disgraceful. I'll just say it's disgraceful that we praise service workers, we praise these folks as essential. Everybody was all essential. I remember everybody was changing their Facebook page, little picture icon. Oh, we love essential workers. They're great. They're wonderful. But now when essential workers will say, well, hey, can I get hazard pay? Can I get paid at least $15 Can I make sure that I have health care for my kids? Now oh no, I don't know how we're going to do it. I mean, give me a break. Give me a break. I don't know how we don't do it. And when you have, like I experienced, where my mom, home health care aide, worked with folks who had severe physical and mental disabilities. Before she passed, after being at the company for years and years and years, I believe the height of what she made was $12.50 as a manager. The end of the year, with all the overtime, everything she did, you're talking $15,000, $16,000 a year. How despicable. How despicable. And you have folks who are raking it in, hand over fist, who are making hundreds of dollars an hour, talk about how much $15, how horrible it will be to our economy. And I had a debate with somebody that folks can go on my Twitter and find, with somebody from the Commonwealth Foundation, which is the largest financial backer of Republicans in the state of Pennsylvania, this organization, the Commonwealth Foundation, where they said their actual position is not only do they not want to raise the minimum wage, their actual position is that there should be $0 minimum wage. $0. And so I find that we so often are having these debates, or the way the debates are framed in the media is, well, oh my gosh, they want 15. That's way too much. When we're having a debate with somebody on the other side who doesn't believe workers should be paid anything. And so, like, I don't even want to have a debate with folks who don't believe that there should be no minimum wage, because I think that that's out of line with what an overwhelming majority of the American people want. What I think we need to do is what majority of the American people want. They want us, I think, to treat workers with fairness, with dignity, and that starts with paying them what they're worth.
That's such a good point that you made, that it's like, why are we letting people who believe that there should be no federal minimum wage to say, oh, that position is too extreme or too liberal? It's like, wait a second, if you had it your way, there would be no. So it's so true that the way that we allow the other side, the Republicans, to frame it, and that the media sort of allows them to sort of set the parameters in terms of the debate. It's just incredible. But yeah, and I know I wanted to close out because I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I wanted to ask you, in sort of closing more broadly, given what's happened this past week with gun violence, and with this issue of voting rights, and this broader problem or crisis we're having in American culture. The way that President Obama put it, in terms of, with the issues we're dealing with disaffection and racism and misogyny. Like, I know you live in a state that basically is a microcosm of the United States. It's such a diverse, but also such a, almost evenly divided state. Like, what has that been like, being in the middle of sort of the eye of the storm? And are you optimistic, or are you worried about sort of the direction and our capability to get ourselves out of this crisis?
There's nothing we can't do. Nothing. If we do it together. I think about what we did with police reform. In the summer, we passed, last summer, 4 different bills. Now, Republicans have a majority in the House and in the Senate. And so this is a big deal, what we got done. Got 4 bills around police reform. Myself, other members of the Black Caucus, staged to sit in, actually, in the Speaker's rostrum, refusing to move until we got agreement that we were going to do something around police reform. Now, these weren't new bills that were introduced because of the tragic murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. They were bills that had been around for a long time. But how did we get them done? And how did we get unanimous support for these bills? What happened is that we had folks stepping up, using their voice in 61 of our 67 counties, 61 of 67 counties, demanding that we respond to what was happening in the country. When you hear folks who are coming in talking about they're going to be a savior, don't believe it. The saviors that we're looking for, first of all, it's with an S always. But the first one is looking at you in the mirror. You know, I open talking about that advice that my mom gave me, and I hear her in my head all the time. If you care so much, you got to go do something about it. And what gives me a lot of hope is there's so many people who never met Kelly Kenyatta who are taking that advice, who are doing something about it. You're using your platform, as you do all the time, to talk to people about issues that matter and engage your followers to engage and talk about these issues. There are so many people who never saw themselves as political, but who are recognizing that you might not do politics, but politics does you. And so you got to get engaged and get involved in this stuff. Absolutely. And so that gives me a lot of hope. And I have a lot of hope sitting here as a, top tier series candidate for the United States Senate, being a poor black gay kid from North Philly. And so I couldn't get out of bed if I didn't have hope. But we have to take that hope and turn that hope into real action. Because there are people right now in our communities who need us to do something. They need us to do something right now. And so let's get about doing it. Let's get about doing it.
Absolutely. It's so inspiring. And seriously, sir, such an honor. I really appreciate you doing this. In closing, perhaps we could once again mention both your website, but also your social media handles and how people can donate and volunteer.
So easy. Everything on social is at Malcolm Kenyatta. So easy. Just MalcolmKenyatta.com, at Malcolm Kenyatta on Twitter. I have a big mouth. You'll find me.
Representative, thank you. Please, everybody watching, please donate. Please volunteer. Please follow him on social media. Thank you, sir. Seriously. And
Thanks,
good luck. And anything I can do in the future, please let me know. And hopefully we meet in person one day. I hope.
Well, I'm very much looking forward to it. My partner is from California. I love WeHo. It's been many a good night, early morning.
Once things reopen, hopefully, I know late night, early morning.
That's right.
If you do a fundraiser, or once things reopen, if you do a fundraiser or an event here in West Hollywood or LA, let me know. I'd love to be a part of it and host.
Well, we'd love to do it. And the last thing I'll just say, everybody, please, as soon as it's your turn, get vaccinated. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Stay well.